only consume a half hour?
About 40 minutes.
Oh no. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. I thought I had an hour.
No worries.
Oh.
So let me jump in here.
Okay, I'll have to put the code out there for you guys now as my penance. So
No worries. So hopefully you can see my screen. Let me bring up something. Does anyone see my Cisco Modeling Labs on the screen?
Yeah, we see it. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had to click back to. Cool. All right. So some of you may be joining for the first time. I'm not sure, but we did have a study group a couple weeks ago where I showed folks how to go to a repo, which is this repo, and pull down this topology file. So this topology file is used for the Cisco Modeling Labs that's in the Devnet Sandbox. And the study guide here on this post has like all the information of how to go through DevNet and do all these things. So for the sake of time, I'm going to be starting kind of down here, past all this stuff. All right, so this is all from last time. And unfortunately, last time I had to use my own lab because the DevNet sandboxes were actually down. But I recorded all that. So if anyone needs that, it's on the YouTube channel. And all these links, you know, it's kind of a spattering of different things going on here. The main thing, or the main landing page for all this stuff, is on the Meetup group. So like right now, this is the event page for today. And what'll happen is this will turn into a past event. So if you come back to the Meetup group, you'll see past events. And if you click on it, you'll see like the ones we did earlier. So let me come in to the main landing page, just like if you were joining for the first time. Here's the main landing page, and when you scroll down, here's like the future ones, but like for the one that I mentioned from last week, you can go in there. Actually, that's not it. All right, so past events, there's 3 past events, see all. Right, so this one here was the first one. And then this was like the first part of the second session where we did like a demo of event-driven automation. And then we got into the workshop. So in this particular event, that's not the right workshop. Event-driven. Well, I guess this is, yeah, this is like the entire event from that day. So yeah, February 24th. So sorry about that. So February 24th, when you go in there, you'll notice that I'll leave some links. So for this particular event, I'll include like Jason's repo and like anything else that we talk about today that has a link, I'll include those in there. So this is a place where you can go to and find the breadcrumbs of whatever we talked about. So a lot of things are in here, like the actual recording afterwards, and things like the study guide and stuff like that. So here's slides, recording, the Discord channel. If you haven't seen that yet, we have that as our chat room, if you will, for like questions and things like that. And then here's the actual repos. And then I guess I put the study group in the very first one. I'll probably go back and add this, I'm not the study group, but the study guide. I'll probably add that into each one of these to make it a little bit easier. So if I go back into the first one, which was this, there's Discord. Where the heck did I put the study guide? this one and that one is something different. Oh, maybe I didn't put the study guide in here. So let me put that into the chat room and I'll add it into there. This will always be the link to the study guide. It'll just grow over time. So I'll go ahead and paste that in here. And then I'll add it into those other pages. All right, so that's the link right here into the study guide. So the study guide is this. And as you go through it, it'll explain like what we did in the first session was building a repository so that way you can save your work as we go through. And then there's a repository that I add files into. So there's two different repositories. So that's kind of where we pick up today. So the first part of this is to clone down the one for the Ansible4Networking study group. So this one will change. And because you're using sandboxes for this, if you're following along now, or if you go and reserve your sandbox later, that jump box is ephemeral. So like whatever you're working on, it'll go away. So the reason why we're using these repositories is so that I can keep adding, new files for new labs and things, and then you can pull those down, and then you have your working repository that you can update with all of your individual labs that you're working on, so you don't lose any progress. Or if you want to go back and redo labs, you'll have your examples that you've already worked on. So this one right here, I'm going to go ahead and bring that one down on what we call the dev box, is the jump box that runs inside of the sandbox, the Cisco sandbox. So did I lose my, no, I still have my VPN. So let me bring up another one of these. So it's the same information for everybody. And you'll see that you'll receive an email from Cisco if you're not familiar with DevNet. And what they do is they provide you with your VPN credentials. And then once you log into your sandbox for the Cisco Modeling Labs sandbox, then what happens is all the IP addressing and everything and credentials are the same for everybody. So developer is the username. 10.10.20.50 is always the address of the dev box. And the password is always capital C1SCO12345, which is in the study guide. And you can see I don't have any of these files yet. So it's just like the stock dev box, as you will. So what I want to do is clone it down. So git clone, and then this is the address of the Ansible4Networking study group. And then it changes directories into it. And you'll notice that there's various files here. So this file, you can download this file opposed to what we're doing here by cloning it. You can also grab the file directly. So when I create my topology here in this Cisco Modeling Labs, I already did that. But what I had to do is I go into the repo and find it. So this is that same address that we use for the git clone. So you can just put that address in your browser, go into GitLab. If you haven't created an account, you'll need to create an account so that you can create your own repository to work from. And all those steps have been documented up until this point. When you click on this file here, this is a topology file. It's a YAML file that is a definition of what you want to build in terms of the topology in the DevNet Sandbox. You can download that file, just this file. You don't have to download the whole repository locally unless you want to. You can certainly do that as well. But you can download just this file. That's what I did. And then I upload that file into CML. So to do that, you just click on import, find the file. This is the one that I uploaded earlier. I'm not going to do it again. And then you'll import it. And then when you go back to your dashboard, you'll see it here. Another thing to note is that this is the default lab that's running. So this is turned on by default when you access your pod. However, there's not enough resources to run this default topology and then subsequently bring up a second topology. Hence, you're going to want to go in here first and turn it off. Otherwise, you'll have all sorts of problems trying to bring this up. So if you click here, it'll turn it off. You may see a message that says that it failed, but sometimes you'll see when you go in here, you might see like 1 or 2 of these still turned on. So you just click on them and then turn them off. But most of the time, it will terminate each one of these. It just goes in a particular order and it takes like a minute or so. Once those are done, then you bring up yours and then turn it on, and it should look like this. So all of my routers and switches are running. There's 2 Nexus switches. These are 2 CSR 1000Vs for the distribution. And then the core is also a CSR. This is a topology that's more similar to what the Ansible specialist topology looks like. It's a hands-on lab. But what you will notice is it is a bit different. Like when you go take the test, I don't have everything exact same, for obvious reasons, right? But it's close enough. And what you'll also note is that in the current state of that exam, there's 2 different vendors. There's Cisco, and then there's Vios. In the future, it looks like, and it's not 100% set in stone, they're reevaluating like the next generation of this thing, and it looks like it's going to be Cisco. So more than likely, it'll be CSRs and Nexus because those are well known. But it could be like Catalyst. I'm not sure what they decide to actually run in that lab environment. But we're in good shape because one of the key tenets that we need to understand is working with different operating systems and being able to set up groups. So we'll be able to do that in this environment because we have iOS routers and then we have Nexus OS. So, that's only 2 differences, but it'll show us how to manage, 2 different types of groups and then apply, similar configurations through Ansible into both of those. So I don't want to spend too much time here. Again, you can go back into the guide and kind of catch up to that point. So the other thing that we want to do is we want to bring up our environment. The jump box is old, but for me, it was a necessary evil, if you will, because I was debating on whether or not having everyone install like their own environment locally. And, that's presents a challenge, right? Because not everybody is familiar with like RHEL or even Linux for that matter. So the jump box gives me a huge advantage by giving you a platform that you can just join. It's free, and we can work from Ansible command line in that environment. Now, over time, I want to incorporate some of the newer tools that, depending on your timing, if you go for that test, and again, this study group could be for folks that could care less about the test that just want to learn Ansible. Either way, over time, at some point, you're going to want to adopt some of the newer tooling. So Ansible Navigator is the newer command line, and that one runs from a container, and I think I mentioned it earlier. I alluded to like execution nodes is different than the way that folks run like the open source command line Ansible. And within those execution nodes, we have execution environments that are based off of containers, as opposed to virtual environments, which is just a way of organizing like your Python applications, which Ansible happens to be a Python application. So long story short, we're kind of evolving. So we're kind of learning a lot of the some of the older stuff and current state, and then we'll slowly start to adopt some of the newer tools. So one of those will be the Ansible Navigator, and then the second will be the controller from the Ansible automation platform. The controller used to be Tower, and then now Tower has evolved and morphed into like multiple components that together they provide a platform. So instead of, again, all the intricacies and challenges of trying to install that stuff, I'll help those that want to do that, and we'll have like a Discord channel just for that. But what I'm trying to do is to make it easier for you to learn the thing before we go into too many challenges of installing it and all that kind of stuff, is I'll use a second lab environment. So we'll kind of switch gears at some point and kind of move off of the Cisco DevNet, and we'll use some of the Red Hat lab resources And that's where we'll learn the navigator and also the controller from the automation platform. But right now it's all about network automation, and it certainly works using the Ansible command line. So that's where we're going to become most familiar, and then we'll start to evolve later. So as part of the setup here, I'm going to continue to create some scripts to make it a little bit easier to get started. So this one here is just a necessary evil, again, because of the jump box having older Python and some other challenges. We have to tweak it a bit so that we can use it. So I'm going to go ahead and run through some of these, and then you'll start to adopt these scripts. And over time, the scripts themselves will become more advanced as we're installing different things and the like. But I'll try to make it as easy as I can on your end, and also to avoid too many manual things we got to do to spin these environments up. So let me bring this up and move it over the terminal. And I think I copied this already, just in case. And I'll move this over so you don't have to keep seeing me click between the two. All right, so we're right here. All right, so this is just an environment variable for username, because you're going to use your own username from your repo as opposed to mine. And I'll call that out in the study guide to make sure that you're not using my stuff. That's just an example. So we set that variable for the GitLab user. And then the other thing is this make file. So you'll notice that the files that we brought down, here's the make file. So this is just going to run this setup.sh script, and this script will change over time. So again, as you're cloning down this repo, when you go into the dev box, you will always have the updated files, so additional lab files and so on. So this is just something we'll pull down, and it'll become standard thing that we pull down, and then you'll have access to that stuff. So if you just type make, it'll run that script. Now, the reason why it's uninstalling Ansible is they do have an Ansible on there, but it's using the old Python 2.7. So we want it to remove that, install a more current Ansible, as well as some of these other files or these other applications that we need. So there's a couple different things that we really need. This net adder will allow us to do some of those filters that we were talking about earlier, for manipulating the addresses and CIDR and so on. Now, sometimes the download, this is like a DevNet thing. We don't always have any control, right, of what's going on in their environment. So sometimes this may take a few minutes. I think they have a throttle also for like pulling down files. But once this finishes, we will have, or I will have, my project repo, because that's one of the things that are in the script. It's going to pull down my repo based off of my username. Which I screwed that up. Let me that's going to fail. We'll have to wait for this to go through. I need to actually replace that with my username. But just note that you can reserve the sandboxes for about 4 hours. So some of the like upfront time, go through. And that's why I want to script it out more for you as well. You'll just get used to running those scripts, and then you'll jump in and be able to get started. Hopefully this bandwidth thing's not a problem moving forward. Has anyone actually experienced slowness, or maybe it's just this one that I registered or reserved?
I had some yesterday, yeah.
Yours was slow too?
Yeah, mostly on this initial part of the lab where it was installing Ansible.
Yeah, I think they're probably throttling. And the reason for that is, I came over from Cisco. Well, for those that don't know that, I came over from Cisco, and for a while they're having a lot of problems with people like misusing sandboxes. So I think they've throttled a lot of the bandwidth to prevent like people from doing anything malicious or to the point where it's not really going to be that harmful. But you can't just blast like a bunch of traffic, or I think that's what's happening. Is it's a little bit slower now. Which I'll do this ahead of time next time. I just wanted to show you guys step by step. But I could bring up while that's doing that, I'll fix that environment variable. Oh, let's get him. Okay. So my username is TUBO1. Another thing I'll do is I'll also have a repo with like all the solutions in it as well as we get a little bit further into this. Go back to you. So yeah, we're kind of like at a standstill into this thing. Finish this. I'm going to Cisco Live, so I'm going to try to meet with a lot of these sandbox folks to just ask them if they can update the Linux on that VM that they use for the jump box, because like all this, that's the only reason I'm doing this is because it's just the versions are too old, and like even the Python's not supported anymore. It's 3.6. So while this is doing that, we can talk about inventories. So let's make this a little bit bigger. So in terms of inventories, there's a lot of information, and to kind of keep it simple, at least in terms of getting started, I've decided to show you the YAML format for creating inventories. You can use INI. A lot of the older examples use that. YAML is more important for us, like moving forward, to kind of understand that construct anyway for just about everything that we're doing in Ansible. So we'll take it from that perspective. This document here will go into much detail into inventories. So I would encourage you to go through this one and take a look at it. And we don't have time to like really level set at this lower level of detail, but I just wanted to let you know that that's there. Oh, I see what it did. It didn't open up a new tab. Okay, so so that's there. In our inventory that we're going to build, we want to incorporate all the devices that are in our topology. So we've got these 5 routers. And again, some of those, actually, this is a typo. I need to fix that. That's an XE as well. So I'll take a note of that. So these 3 are XEs, and then these 2 are Nexus OS. So when we build an inventory, we can use groups. And in the documentation, it'll go into detail on how to build groups, but also child group relationships. So we will create some of that here as well. And effectively what we're doing is we want to work at the device level, but we also, the devices that we want to create groups for, so like devices that have similar OS and connection types and those types of things. But then we also want to create like higher level groups so that way we can group our groups together. So when we organize the inventory in these parent and child relationships, we can start to envision like how we want to connect to these devices based off of our use cases. And there's really no limit to the types of groups that we want to create. And if we want to apply automation across everything that's in our inventory, we do have an implicit all. So in that case, every group and every device in those groups, it would apply to those. So in this particular inventory, we're going to kind of piece part it together. So the first part of it is to get our devices going into their groups, and then we'll start to organize the parent or the child groups into the parent groups. So let me see if we can do that. Yeah. All right. So it did finish, and it's asking for my my username. That might be because it may have still used the wrong one. So let's see what happens. So this is installing the collections for iOS and for Nexus OS. Okay, so that's done. And I do not have my particular repo, so that's not a big deal. So here's the one that I created before. And if you go into your repo, into my project, the one that you created, you can always go back to it from the GitLab page, and you can just click clone, and you can grab the link from there. So if you ever need to do this manually, you can just do that. Just remember to change your username before you run the script, and you won't have to worry about that. So let's git clone, paste. All right, so now I've got my project in here, but I screwed up doing it manually because I actually added that into the other one, so that's not good. So I did that on purpose so that you would know not to do this. So I can just get rid of that one, do it again. CD ... will take me back to the home directory, or you can do CD tilde, right? So now I'm back up here. This is where I want to clone it. I can just up arrow key back to this. That's where I want it. All right. So then from this point forward, and I know we don't have much time left, so I'm just going to try to do a couple of these things, and then we'll call it a day here for this recording. Is I'm going to go into my project, right? And you see there's some files in here. So if you went through the previous section of the study guide, you would have created this Ansible.config. And this inventory, I don't think the inventory might not have anything in it yet. So let's take a look at that one. Yeah, so there's nothing there for us yet. So we're going to work on that file. But Ansible config should have a few things in there. And Ansible config is the file that overrides the defaults for Ansible. So there's various configuration options there that you can set. And what I set here the last time, I think the gathering facts, that's what this one means here for gathering explicit. So that way by default it's off, and then we'd have to explicitly turn it on. I think that was already in there, but we were adding this host key checking. So this one means that we don't have to check. That way we override that. That is the default. So with our SSH, we'll be able to connect to these devices without that check. So that is not a part of like the defaults. So that's what this means. It's like we're just overriding the normal Ansible defaults. And this is in our working directory, so this Ansible config file would supersede any other Ansible config file, like any default one that used to be installed in older versions, like into the etc Ansible folder. You will still see some stuff there until you override it. So like one way to see that is Ansible version. You can see all the paths. Right, so here you can see different paths to files, and this is the one that I'm using. So this is in my project, is in my home directory. So this is the actual one that we're using, so it's reading that one in. And these are just different locations for Python and everything else that we depend on to run our Ansible. So that the version command shows us all that. So we have that there, and then so back to the inventory. So we'll create the first part of the inventory. So that file's already there, but it's empty. Just to point out a couple things here, I could explicitly list out all of the hosts. So this is the YAML syntax. So this is the name of a group. So I have core router group, and in that group, I have host, and it happens to be just one host. When you have one host, there's no need to be like, there is syntax based off of if you have a list or not. So if I did have more than one line here, I would put a colon at the end of this. So each one of those items that are host, each one of those would have a colon. But since there's just one, there's no need to do that. The same thing here, I do have two routers, but because we're using the sequence here, it's still just one line. But if I had actually explicitly listed out distribution router 1 and distribution router 2, then those would have the colons. So this is important to understand those types of syntax options, especially later, like if you're testing on this stuff, they may ask you like different ways of doing things. So again, all of that's covered back in that URL link that we looked at earlier in the documentation. So currently, when you have a testing environment, you have Vim available, right? So I would select that over VI because Vim at least gives you some color coding and things like that. So that is available. Currently, VS Code is not. So I use the Microsoft Visual Studio Code as my IDE. But I think that they may add that. I mean, that's something that is on the table right now. And if they do, then it makes it easier because they may allow you to use lint tools and things that help you with the syntax. But for Vim, at least you do have different color that is available from like a plugin for YAML. So it's a lot better than using VI because then you're kind of on your own, and syntax does matter. So spacing and things like that. And again, like those colons and stuff, all those things you're going to want to become very familiar with. So I'm just going to grab this one and start populating my inventory real quick. So I'll use Vim. All right, so when you're in this type of editor, you have to hit I to insert into it. All right, and then there's already 3 dashes in here, so that would have been another rookie mistake. So I'll get rid of those since that's in what I'm pasting. All right, so everything's in here, looks good. And then to save this particular inventory, you hit escape, and then colon WQ. And then I think if it was already existing, I'll hit the bang, and it should be fine. All right, so I saved it there. And then if I want to see that it works, if your syntax is off in your inventory, it will kick back an error here. So we have the Ansible inventory command that we can use. So I always check my inventory from a syntax perspective to save some time. Let me clear this so it's not at the bottom for you. So all these are Python warnings and things. So that's not anything that we care about. And it pasted it in twice, I think. So that's where that got screwed up. But this is what's important right here is we have the implicit all, and then here's the groups that we created with the host. And then ungrouped, if there were anything ungrouped, then it would list it out underneath there. So for all intents and purposes, the first part of the inventory is fine. Now for the second part, we wanted to take these groups and then further group them. So in order to do that, we have to continue into our inventory here. And what you notice is we have children. So this parameter here would be the other groups. So we already have these groups defined with host. So this A for N router would include all of the router groups. So we have the core routers and the distribution routers. And then the A for N switch, we only have one group of switches. So the disk switch here, we have two switches, but we only have one group. So there's only one child group. And then we can take both of these, the A for N router and A for N switch, group them together into A for N network or net, right? So we can just add this to the existing file. So to do that, I have to go back into my editor. Let me clear this all out. Right, and make sure that it pastes in properly. Right, so that's all aligned. And we'll know in a second anyway. Save that one. Yep. Yep. There we go. Yeah, so basically here, the graph option at the end here is what's important. When you run a playbook, if you haven't defined it in your Ansible.config, like where the inventory file is, then you would have to explicitly add it here. But for running this command, I think we still have to explicitly do that. So that's why that -I alludes to the inventory that we want to open up, because you could have more than one inventory file available in your working directory or your project, as they call it. And then with graph it out and see the relationships. Right, so in this one now, we have the all, and then we have our A for N router that has the core router with the actual group and then the router underneath, and then the disk router group with its two routers. And then A for net has the A for N router and the A for N switch, and then it breaks it down into the the disk switch group that has the two Nexus switches. And then there is nothing else ungrouped. So everything is in a group. So for all intents and purposes, this inventory should be good to go. It should be usable. So the second thing here, and I know like we went over time, and I may be like sitting here talking to myself, oh, there's actually still people. Okay, thank you for staying on longer. So what I'll do is I'll just save where we're at now, and we can pick it up the next time, because I know I don't want to keep you guys too much longer since it's St. Patrick's Day, right? So let's just do that so I can show you like how I save these. And this is a process that you'll do each time, so you don't lose your work. So we have our inventory, and it's in my project, right? So what I want to do is, we've made the change to this existing file, so you always have to remember to add it. Now, did we change any of it? Yeah, I think we only changed that one file. So you could either add an individual file, or if you want to just add everything that's in your repo, you can use all. Right, so now if I do a get status, it should show it staged, which it's not showing it green because of this terminal, but normally you would see this green in most terminals. But it shows that it's modified, so it's there, but we haven't committed it yet. So when we commit it in Git terminology, that means that we're okay, like we're done making changes. So we've added it and staged it. and we're ready to commit these changes. So it's -M. You can put whatever comment you want. Sometimes I'll put something very descriptive if we do something more complicated. But for now, I'll just put initial. So I committed this in here, and it's saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't know who you are, right? So one of the things that we would normally do, and I think my script was supposed to do this, but since it failed, is we have to tell it our username. And that was the part that I didn't do. So we'll just do that real quick manually. So that's not my username, so let's change it. And then this one, it just wants to see that there's something in here for the email, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a real email. So I'll just put in this example one in there. All right, so now I should be able to commit it. All right, so it allowed me to commit it because it knows who I am, but it's still only local. So for this to go up into GitLab and to commit into the main branch of my GitLab, my project, then what I have to do is push it. Right, so I still have to log in again because I didn't set everything up for that. That's a bunch of extra work that you can do to integrate in with your GitLab. That's really easy to do from VS Code, but not so easy from the terminal. It's a little bit different. And then the password, my password. This will be the password that you use to create your GitLab, your username. And then you'll see that here that it actually pushed those files up into the repository. So if I go into my project now, and if I click into, let me refresh the screen real quick. If I click on inventory, this is all the stuff that we just did. Right, and this is the commit ID that it creates for the history of this. And what else is there? Yeah, that's the only thing that we changed. So there's really nothing else to look at. So now I have my changes. So this is something you're going to want to do at each conclusion of whatever labs you're working on, if you want to save your work. So wherever you're at, and the lab guide will always be there to go back in time, but you'll just want to do this because as you're building these, you may not want to keep creating these files. So you'll have them as you move forward. So yeah, so that's the GitLab. There was some other stuff that I was going to cover, but we'll just pick it up from here. We're going to continue to add more to our Ansible config. And then we're going to work with some variables and things. Yeah, so we don't have time to get into all these. But a lot of this stuff are things that are foundational that we need to know, regardless if we're going to run the command line or run Ansible Navigator that I mentioned earlier, or AAP. So these are things that even though we do them once and we might save them, you're going to want to practice a lot of these and do them over and over again, because it's just best practices of getting started to prepare for running your automation. And those are the foundational skills that they're certainly going to test you on during the test. So sorry we went over a bit here, but I'm going to go ahead and pause for a second in case anybody has any comments or questions before I cut the recording off.
I just wanted to say we have the Discord channel, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to utilize it, and we as a group can kind of help to provide some answers. Tony helped me with some VPN issues that we went through. We kind of learned a lot. So if anybody is trying to connect through either RHEL or Fedora or some other form of Linux distro into the DevNet environment, feel free to ask questions in there because we've kind of learned a lot over the last couple of days.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt, for especially bringing up the Discord, because I think that's where I also put the study guide link there. So it's good to have multiple ways of communicating, but now I might be forgetting to put everything, all the breadcrumbs everywhere. So Discord will be one place where you'll find links there too. And then in the Meetup group in the past events, I'm going to go back into the past events and make sure that the study guide link is in all of them. So that way it doesn't matter which event you go back to in time. You'll have all the same links. And for people that are watching this video in the future here, just remember that we have this study guide and you can start from the beginning. and all the videos will give you like the what we worked on during the meetup group. But then the Discord, you can look at that, and there'll be a good history of like questions that were asked there. And then feel free to jump in, even with like older labs and stuff. We'll be able to track, where you're at in the study guide, and we'll be able to help you out. But again, thanks everybody for joining. I hope you have a great St. Patrick's Day, and have fun this evening. And I'll talk to you on the next one, where we're going to talk about the new validated content for networking, which is really cool stuff. So with that, take care.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
guys.
Thanks. And thanks, Jason.